the Raiders drafted 3 or 4 of my favorite players in this draft. I love Michael Mayer as a tight end. I love the big offensive lineman they drafted, or they got after the draft, Curtis McClendon. Love
Oh
Curtis
yeah,
McClendon from Tennessee Chattanooga.
yeah.
I love Jacorian Bennett, the corner from Maryland. And
Mhm.
I was super hot to trot on Byron Young, the defensive lineman from Alabama.
Yeah.
Of course, the Raiders also got Tyree Wilson, Jaden Grant, who I believe is Brian Grant's kid,
Yep.
as a college free agent, defensive back. What of their rookies, Rye? Which ones have looked good to you so far?
Trey Tucker, Jacorian Bennett has looked really, really well. I think those are the two that really pop up. Michael Mayer is an obvious one. And obviously, we know Jimmy Garoppolo loves his tight end, so that's going to be his security blanket. And I know he's been banged up here and there, but Michael Mayer is a guy who probably lead all rookie tight ends in catches, all 3 categories: catches, touchdowns, receiving yards. That's just my opinion and prediction. But those guys are really standing out to me from the get go. Byron Young was kind of banged up, so it's kind of like I haven't seen enough on him yet. But again, when you talk about the rookies that are coming in, Jacorian Bennett is a guy who I really like. I think he's going to be a stud. I think he's going to be one of those diamonds in the rough when it's all said and done. You look back at this 2023 draft class.
Yeah, Bennett's a nice corner, and the Tennessee Chattanooga offensive lineman is a big time body. I mean,
Yeah.
he can play guard, he could play center. I mean, he can play guard, he can play tackle. I should say. Curtis McClendon, has McClendon shown anything in the early going? I know he's kind of running with the threes right now, but
Yeah.
man, I really liked his film from Tennessee Chattanooga.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was I mean, I spoke with a few people internally. They were surprised that he was available, right? Like here's a guy that was undrafted. Like, how is he still undrafted? So they're really high on him. They like him a lot. I think he's going to make the 53-man roster. I don't think he's not going to make the 53-man roster. And he's a developmental player. I think what they see in him is the intangible traits that they can work with for the foreseeable future. It's all about growth. Under Coach McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler's scheme and how they like to run things and their philosophy is, grow and develop, right? Draft and develop, grow and develop. So again, they want to get these guys up to speed on what they like to do, teaching the techniques that they want. Coach Carmen Brasilla is doing a good job of that. He does a really good job at bringing up these younger guys and getting the most out of the talent that they can have. And so I think at the end of the day, they're really happy with McClendon Curtis's progress up to this point, despite running with the threes.
What do you make of the running back? I mean, what's the deal with Jacobs? I mean, there's been speculation that they're going to trade him. He's coming off a 2,000-yard season. They got a bunch of backs. I mean, Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, Brandon Bolden, who comes over from New England. There's Britton Brown, the former UCLA Bruin. They just signed Damian Williams. They got Sincere McCormick, who played he was one of the backs that Spencer Burford blocked for at University of Texas San Antonio. I mean, they got a handful of backs that are all pretty intriguing. Obviously, Jacobs is the star.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal? Do they expect Jacobs to sign? Are they going to hardline him? Are they going to trade him? How's that going to resolve itself?
I mean, all that is such speculation. Like, if you were to ask me, right, on August 12th, 2023, what's going to happen? I think at the end of the day, Jacobs will show up. I think there's a lot of money left on the table for him not to show up. We don't want another Le'Veon Bell situation, right? We all know what happened there. So to a smaller extent, obviously, Le'Veon Bell wanted wide receiver money, right? We all remember that because he was doing so well. But I think Josh Jacobs will ultimately end up playing, sign his tender, sign that franchise tag, not be traded. I don't think he's going to be traded. I don't see that happening at all. There's a report by Mike Florio saying if they release him, he might go to. I mean, I don't see that either. So I think if you were to ask me, I'm 95% confident. Now, no one's telling me this. This is just my prediction that he will show up, sign his tender, and be ready for week 1.
He's a great back, man. Yeah, you talked to some of the 49er players after their game last year in Vegas against the Raiders, and they're like, Jacobs is the best back we faced all year.
Yeah. Bosa said that, and it's funny because the valuation of the running back is so subjective, right? It's based on the scheme. It's based on how you formulate the philosophy of how you build up your team. at the end of the day, it's really interesting because to me, if you're going to try to win and go into late football in the playoffs, and when it comes to November and December, the weather conditions change. And that means what? You have to have a strong defense backed up by a strong rushing attack, right? Although the offensive line may blow up those holes, you still need a running back to see those holes, whether it be a zone blocking scheme or a power-based run scheme. So again, Josh Jacobs is not a one-trick pony. He rarely fumbles the football. He does everything you ask of him. First one in, last one out. He embodies what the Raider way is. Coach Lombardi, who used to coach for the San Francisco 49ers, called him his favorite player last year. So how is it not having your favorite player on the field as we head into 2023? We don't know. But I mean, for a coach to give that kind of praise on record says how much Josh Jacobs means to the Raiders organization.
He's a great, great player. Were you surprised that the Raiders parted ways with Waller, the tight end, because he was one of the best tight ends in pro football? They sent him to the New York Giants, and obviously they got a nice return in the trade. Was that all a cap issue? I mean, I know Waller had some issues with substance going back to the Ravens days and years ago, but I mean, the thought was that he had beaten all that. Why do you think they decided to part ways with Waller?
Just because I think it was time. I think he needed a fresh start. I mean, all signs pointed to that. It's interesting because when I'm in the locker room every single day, so I can kind of see the body language, who talks to who, and that type of dynamic. And so, what I've saw, I can only speak for myself, is no one was really talking to Darren Waller. I mean, when you walk into the locker room, his locker's on the right hand side, but he was kind of like keeping to himself, and no one really came up to him, interacted with him, joked with him. So maybe that had some type of, I don't know. I mean, I'm just seeing what I'm seeing. But he was liked by the players. I didn't find a player that didn't like him, that didn't like what he brought to the table, that didn't think that he was a top 5 tight end. So I don't know what happened there, because again, that was just my first year and just being there. But at the end of the day, I think maybe both organization and Darren Waller needed a fresh start, and that's why they went ahead and traded up in the second round and drafted Michael Mayer after they went ahead and shipped out Darren Waller.
What do you think of Patrick Graham's defense? I mean, last year was his first year as a defensive coordinator. He's been in New York Giants, Miami, Green Bay, New England. You go back to Toledo, Notre Dame. Wasn't he at Arizona State for a while? I mean, Graham's been around the block quite a bit. Yeah. What do you think of him as a defensive coordinator?
Great. It's the same dynamic that when people were trying to say that Coach Saleh should be fired, I defended Coach Saleh, said, no, he's going to be a head coach one of these days. And, well, you're just a 49er, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nah, man, I keep things 100. Like, same thing with Coach Graham. There's Raiders fans calling for Coach Graham's head. And I'm like, nah, man, like, let me tell you something. When I watch practice, and I break down film, I break down fundamentals, I break down game film and stuff, you can kind of see the rules of engagement of what he's trying to preach. I always say players play and coaches coach, right? It's up to the players to get things done on the field. It's up to the coaches to put those players in the best position to make plays. So again, it is an ultimate team sport, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the horses to call out those plays, it's not the coach's fault. You just don't have the horses. So that's why I always put it back on, at the end of the day, it falls on both parties, but I'm really, really a huge supporter of Coach Graham. I think he's, one of the best defensive minds in the game. And although the rankings don't reflect that, you can kind of see that in how he schemes things up. And it's no surprise how the 49ers coaches have praised Coach Graham in the interview process throughout these joint practices, because they know what he brings to the table, and he does a really good job no matter where he goes.
What do you think? I mean, they've got Chandler Jones and Max Crosby on the edges. Mm-hmm. They just drafted Tyree Wilson, who is a tremendous talent, but he's also 275 pounds. He's almost like a tweener tackle end combo. Mm-hmm. You got Tillery, who kind of bombed with the Chargers. Mm-hmm. Belial Nichols, who I've always liked, going back to college, and he came over from Chicago. And you got some other guys here as well. I mean, I mentioned Byron Young. Mm-hmm. There's the kid Silvera's strong as hell.
Yeah.
How do you see that defensive line, and how is Tyree Wilson going to be utilized? Is he going to be a backup to Crosby? Are they going to play him some inside? How do you anticipate them utilizing Tyree Wilson? He was a very high pick. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was, what was he? He was top 10, wasn't he?
top 7. Yeah, 7 overall. Yeah, they think he's going to be the next Myles Garrett, potentially. Potentially the next Myles Garrett. Potential is a strong word, but potentially that's what the feeling is at Raiders headquarters. Literally, Myles Garrett. I asked straight up, what's the comparison? Myles Garrett. Different sources.
That's lofty comparison, man.
That is. So I spoke to a guy, internally, and I said, he's like, what do you think of the pick? I was like, well, he has an injury problem. You're banking on potential. I would have rather you drafted, a Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronski or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think that they view Tyree Wilson as the next Myles Garrett, and how they're going to utilize him is he's coming off a Lisfranc injury. So he's not even practicing right now. I think they're going to ease him in, and I don't think they're going to rush him back too soon. I had this conversation with another beat writer yesterday, and he asked me for my thoughts on Tyree Wilson. I said, look, he's going to be a backup. Oh, backup at numbers. I was like, yes, he's going to be a backup. Chandler Jones is there to kind of groom him in, learn the NFL game, teach him the tricks of the trade, and then slowly acclimate him into the program. Because again, at this point in this late in the year, because it is late for him, right? He wasn't there for rookie main camp, wasn't there for OTAs, wasn't there for now training camp. So he's behind the 8 ball. No matter how you get it from the shoulders up, you can get the scheme down, but it's a different ball game transitioning from college game to the NFL. The speed power conversion is a totally different down in the trenches. So again, just from that fundamental standpoint, it's going to take some time to develop. So I think you're going to see Tyree Wilson be a backup in year 1. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that could be a good thing for his progress. Because again, this guy is still learning how to be an NFL pro because he hasn't even stepped on field with an NFL pros yet. So again, they're going to acclimate him slowly. I think they're going to use him in spot situations, situational pass rusher specifically, and probably use him in a 2-point stance or, a 3-point stance. But again, at the end of the day, I don't think he's going to have this big, huge year that people expect him to have.
How about Jordan Willis? I mean, if you had asked many Niner fans in December or Niner players in December, hey, who's the most underrated guy in this room? Several players would have said to me last year, man, Jordan Willis. I remember Demo Lenore said Jordan Willis. Drake Jackson. I said, who's the most underrated guy on the team? He said Jordan Willis. Jordan Willis, very quiet guy, but he's 250 pounds. He runs 4.5 at 270 pounds, I should say.
Yeah.
He was damn good at K-State, and he really came on as a Niner. How's Jordan Willis look so far for you guys?
Good. Nothing has moved the needle too much in terms of my expectation for Jordan Willis. I think he has a very strong get off. One thing that you look for Jordan Willis is his pass rush ability. That's why they brought him in, because again, Chandler Jones was kind of struggling. I don't think he got his first sack until week 13. So, I mean, going that late into the year and not picking up a sack, and Max Crosby being lined up and double teamed and chipped off the line of scrimmage like a Nick Bosa. But again, Nick Bosa had Eric Armstead. he had a really stable defensive line. You look at the Raiders, who do they have outside of Max Crosby, right? If Chandler Jones isn't getting done. So again, that's why they went ahead and drafted Tyree Wilson. That's why they brought in guys like Jordan Willis, because they need some pass rush help. And that's only going to help the back end and the secondary, because the secondary was just in shambles. They were injured. Rock Ya-Sin went down. Nate Hobbs went down. So again, a good secondary is only as good as the guys up front, right? And so again, when you have guys that can kind of move and have moving parts like a Marcus Peters, who they went ahead and signed as a late free agent addition, that's only going to help the back end. But it all starts up front. Jordan Willis is looking really, really strong. In fact, I had I was talking about it with my boy Case, who was also a Raiders beat writer, on Jordan Willis. I said, watch out. We got this kid. He's going to be underrated, and people are going to be talking about him because you're going to see him in situational pass rush duties get it done. And again, that sample size in any game is a small sample size to pull from, but he's going to get it done with the opportunities that come up. So I'm really excited for Jordan Willis and what he brings to the table.
What do you make of the remade secondary? So, you got Jacorian Bennett. He's at one corner. Marcus Epps comes over from the Eagles. I thought he was a pretty good player. Morig, the young second-round pick, is a great athlete. Peters is long in the tooth, but, man, Peters can break on the ball, and he'll pick off passes. Hobbs is a find. The secondary seems like the Raiders, have a better defense because they're better up front and they're better on the back end. What do you think of the remade secondary?
great. I'm really excited and eager. I'm not saying it's a top 5 defense on the secondary or anything like that. What I will say is compared to last year, the depth that they have, the quality depth that they have behind the starters, and again the iron sharpens iron mentality with Coach McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler is alive and well. You know, when they draft guys like Jacorian Bennett, they bring in guys like Brandon Faison. They have guys like Duke Shelley, you know, and they're developing guys like Ike Brown, and some of these other players that you just mentioned. They're really doing a good job, and they still have Amik Roberts in there. He was one of the guys who made the most splash plays last year in that defensive backfield. He had 2 interceptions, 2 of 6. You know, we only had 6 interceptions, the Raiders did. So again, he had 2 of them. So having him another season in their scheme with him, and then undrafted rookie free agent Sam Webb. So there's a lot of good. These aren't just naming people off a roster. I mean, they really think they can develop the Tyler Halls. And you guys saw Tyler Hall, number 37 against the 49ers last year. He played extremely well. So again, they have a good nucleus of players to work with. Now, again, how does that transition from year 1 to year 2 under the scheme? That will be a different question, but I like what they have just from the cornerback position and in the safety position, bringing guys like you said, Marcus Epps, and then returning starters like Trayvon Merrick.
Amik Robertson, there's a lot of people speculating the Raiders could cut him.
Yeah.
Is that possible? I mean, what do you think? I liked him at La Tech. I thought that was a great pick. He's an undersized guy, but he's got great athleticism, explosion. Oh, yeah. He breaks on the ball. I mean, I've seen a couple different Bleacher Report articles, and, you know, they're guessing and they're trying to just get you to click. But, I mean, is he on the bubble?
He is. I think he is. And Meek's my guy. But it's not what I would do if I was GM. I would keep a Meek. I mean, that's not even a question, but I'm not the GM. I'm not GM Dave Ziegler, but I think it's valid that he is on the bubble, because if you look at the guys that they got rid of last year, like not Tashawn Gibson, that's the Niners. Tyree Gillespie, right? Tyree Gillespie was a 4th
Missouri
round pick.
Kid, yeah.
They got rid of him. They got rid of Alex Leatherwood, their 1st round pick. I mean, if you look at the draft class from the John Gruden days and Mike Mayock days, they're no longer there. There's few and far between guys on the roster. So GM Dave Ziegler is bringing in his guys that he wants. It doesn't matter your draft status or where you were drafted, undrafted, don't matter. You know, he's going to bring in his guys. And so Amik unfortunately falls on the other side of the spectrum. Whether that's fair or unfair, that's just, you know, it is what it is. If it was up to me, Amik would be on the roster. I think he is one of the definitely top cornerbacks on the roster for sure, hands down. I think he's outplayed Duke Shelley. I think he's outplayed a few of these other guys that they brought on, like David Long. I think he's way better than those 2 guys up to this point in training camp. We're going to see tomorrow how that shapes out. But yeah, it is warranted that, you know, the reports are that he may be on the outside looking in.